pray. Amen.
Have you ever been given a parting gift? You know, those gifts that either we give to someone when they move away or leave, or maybe something that we get when we move or change jobs. Maybe when you retired, maybe you were given a special gift. I know that when my dad retired, he was given a gift from the Navy, a certificate and a special coin to commemorate all of his 50 years of service in the shipbuilding industry. I have a good friend who was a professor of mine when I was in Bible college. When I graduated from Bible college, I gave him my mountain bike. That may seem kind of odd, but this professor went with me and several friends mountain biking a lot. And he kind of had this old beat up bike that he didn't really see the need in spending his money to go and fix up. But of course, us young guys, we had to have the best of the best and spend all of our money on those things. And he was the type of guy that just was a really good person and spent a lot of time investing in a lot of people, and not even in the classrooms, but also outside the classroom, like on those mountain biking trips, and would do his best to try and really invest in us. And so he was a special person to me. And so when I left college, I left my mountain bike with him, gave that to him as a gift. Well, several years later, I was at home and I got a package in the mail, a box in the mail, had no idea who it was from. Well, it was from my professor. He sent me this small metal bike that had been made in Honduras that he had gotten once on a mission trip. And he sent that to me as a way of saying thank you and saying just a way for me to remember him, another kind of parting gift. Maybe you've experienced those times even when you have a loved one who's either nearing the end of their life or who has passed away, and someone wants to give you something special that was theirs before. Maybe a piece of jewelry or something like that. There was this musical statue, I guess you could say, a wind-up statue that was at my grandparents' house. And every single time I'd go over there, I'd want to wind it up, and it would play the song "Show Me the Way to Go Home." And when my grandparents passed away, I got that little statue, and it's something that whenever I hear that tune or whenever I see it, I think of my grandparents' home. You know, we have those things in our life that are so special, and some of the reasons that they're so special is because of the heart behind the gift, the reason that people give us those gifts, the thought that went into it, the love that went into it. Well, a couple weeks ago, we celebrated Easter, and we were studying the very last part of Jesus's life and ministry here on earth. And before Jesus left to go to heaven, to ascend back up to heaven, he promised his disciples that he would send his Holy Spirit to help them, to help us, to guide us, to live through us. But even before that, he gave his disciples a parting gift, I guess you could say. He gave them a gift, and it's recorded in John chapter 14 and verse 27. Jesus said this. He says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Peace. What is peace? I think in many ways, peace is one of those things that we can talk a lot about what it produces for us, what it does for us, and what it looks like to live a life of peace, but maybe it's not always the easiest thing to truly define. But I believe in many ways that peace is a byproduct of living a holy life. We're in this series right now that we're calling Holy Living, and we're talking about, not necessarily about living perfect and living exactly how we should and never doing anything wrong, because that's really not what God's called us to. Instead, we're talking about a life, a full life that we live in a way that God has called us. And we talked about last week about several different ways, several different things that are the outpouring of a holy life. And we talked about things like love and joy and peace and so many other things. And we saw how those items, those things, those characteristics, they're not our goal in life. We're not called to be a person who just focuses on love, who just focuses on joy and peace. Because there's a lot of people who have those things in their life but don't have God in their life. But instead, Jesus has called us to live a life full of His Spirit. In fact, last week we were called to walk in step with the Spirit, to follow the Holy Spirit's guide and lead in our life. And when we do that, things like peace are the outpouring in our life. The fruit of the Spirit is what we talked about last week, and how those things just kind of come from our life naturally, come from our heart naturally when we live life God's way. One of those things is peace. I believe that this world, the people of this world, all of us, we could use some peace in our life. I think we pursue peace in a lot of different ways. I think we run after peace in a lot of wrong ways. And today we're going to look at how we can have God's peace in our life. Now, when I was studying for this series, I came across a sermon by a pastor by the name of Charles Stanley. Maybe you've heard of some of his sermons before. A really great, really wise pastor. And within this sermon that he preached, he shared like 8 or 9 different statements about peace. And so I wanted to take some of those statements and share them with you today, and share how you and I, how we could live lives of peace, how we can be people who, when we live God's way, we can be people of peace. And so the first thing is that we find peace when we can be people who have a clear conscience. Having a clear conscience is one of the ways that we find peace. A clear conscience is like a shield against the worry and the stress of life. Now, it's not a shield against hardships or bad things happening in life. Sadly, as we've always said, that even bad things happen to good people. And you've probably experienced those things in your life. Things where it seems like you're living the way that God would want. It seems like things like where you're doing things, you're being good to people, you're loving people, you're serving God, you're honoring God with your life. But even in the midst of all that good, sometimes we find that hardships come about and bad things happen in our life. And sometimes it's not even our own fault. You know, sometimes it is our fault. And I think a lot of times we want to blame God and ask God, why is this happening in my life? Well, maybe it's because you're a bonehead and you made a bad choice. But then there are a lot of times that we suffer, and it's at no fault of our own. But when we go through those times of hardships and struggles and maybe even persecution and resistance from people and pushback from people, we can have confidence, because we can be a people with a clear conscience. When we know in our heart that even though things aren't going right in our life, that we've remained true and faithful and steadfast to God. And while there may be a war of hardships going on, raging all around you, within you, you feel confidence because of your clear conscience, and you find this peace. I don't know if you have people in your life like that you look at them and you see them going through struggles and hardships. Maybe you see them suffering through the failing health of a spouse. Maybe you see someone going through a hardship at work where they are being just kind of pushed to the side and pushed down. But in the midst of all that hardship, they're trusting in God. They're remaining faithful. They're keeping a clear conscience, knowing that they are trusting in God with it. The Apostle Paul, he understood how all this worked, because sadly, he was often the brunt of, or he felt the brunt of criticism and opponents. He had people that would come up against him all the time, people that would call into question every part of his life, everything to his ministry integrity, to his personal salvation, to even his personal background and how he grew up and things like that. And sometimes when these kinds of things happen in our life, when people call into question who we are, when people call into question what we do or why we're living a certain way, sometimes we want to fight back and we want to defend ourselves. Sometimes we even want to strike back in the same way. You know, someone's hurt me verbally, well, I'm going to fire something back at them and hurt them in the same way. And I think the reason we do that is subconsciously we kind of convince ourselves that if I tear them down enough, well, then I won't look quite as bad, and it'll kind of elevate me when I tear them down or tear down their argument or whatever it might be, or their objection against me. But it doesn't always work that way. Sadly, a lot of times when we do that, people see the way that we're tearing down other people, and well, it puts us in a bad light, and it makes us look bad too. But if instead, when we go through trials, when we go through hardships, when we go through struggles, when we stand tall, when we stand strong in confidence, because we have a clear conscience and we know that we've trusted in God and we know that we've lived the kind of life He's called us to, we can find peace even in those hardships. The Apostle Paul, when he was attacked in different ways, he would answer back his opponents kind of like this in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Now this is our boast. Our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relations with you, with integrity and godly sincerity. We have done so relying not on worldly wisdom, but on God's grace. Sadly, the majority of the book of 2 Corinthians is Paul defending himself to his objectors in Corinth. And many there, they didn't like Paul. They didn't like the fact that he didn't fit into their ideals. He didn't fit into their traditions. He didn't do things the way that they thought he should do them. And so instead, what they would do is they would seek out other leaders, people who would say the kinds of things that they wanted to hear, say it in the manner they wanted to hear. They would find speakers who were eloquent and would say things with fancy words. And then they would put their trust in those people and call into objection Paul in his ministry. But Paul, he called their attention to his love and his care for them, even in the midst of them objecting to him. And he called their minds back to his consistency in the midst of all that, of how Paul could live a life with a clear conscience and with a great deal of peace. And when you live the kind of life that God has called you to, no matter how other people are living around you, when you live the kind of life that God has called you to, then you can live a life with a clear conscience. When you love people the way that God has called you to love, when you serve people the way that God has called you to serve, when you live a life faithful to God's standards, no matter what everyone else around you is doing and living and saying and being and whatever, when you live that kind of life, you can live with a clear conscience, and that'll give you peace. Well, the next way that we find peace is knowing our eternal destination. I think it's one of the saddest things that there are people who sit in fear of eternity. They worry, have I done enough good things for God to let me into heaven? Well, let me answer that question for you. No, you have not done enough good things for God to let you into heaven, because that's not how all of this works. You see, it's not about, do my good deeds, have I done enough good deeds to outweigh my bad deeds? And honestly, I wouldn't even really know, how do we weigh our deeds? And so then if it's not about keeping some kind of score, then can we ever really know whether or not we've done enough good things, and if we've done enough for God to let us in? It's not like watching a sporting event, where you see up on the scoreboard, you can see how many runs or how many baskets or touchdowns or whatever your team may have scored, and you can know who's winning and who is leading. That's not how life is. It's not about trying to keep score about it. You see, this is not a game. And even beyond that, Jesus has already paid the price for our sin. In John 1, chapter 5 and verse 13, John writes this. He says, I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life. You see, John says, I write these things. And John wrote a lot. He wrote the Gospel of John. He wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. He even wrote the book of Revelation. And he says, look, I'm writing these things to you who have put your faith in God, who are trusting in God for the forgiveness of your sins, for the promise of eternal life. I'm writing to you people so that you can have confidence, so that you may know that you have eternal life. John says that's the whole reason I'm writing all these things. And it's not about what I've done. It's not about having confidence in, I'm writing this so you can know that you've done enough good things. No, that's not what he's saying. It's about saying, I'm writing so that you can have confidence, so you don't have to sit and worry and stress over, do I have this reassurance? Can I know that I truly have salvation? Yes, you can know. And why does this give us peace? Why is this such a big deal? Why do we need to have confidence in what is to come for eternity? Well, for one thing, We don't know when our life is going to end. And so if we go through life not having a confidence of what's to come after this life, and if we're going through life and we don't know when it's going to end, that's going to be building a lot of stress. It's so sad whenever we read on things like Facebook of people sharing about loved ones who have died, and especially when they die so suddenly, or maybe they die so young, and we read that and we think, man, it's just so terrible that it would happen so abruptly and so suddenly like that. And it's never easy. But we just kind of go through life, and I think the reason we get surprised is that we go through life just expecting that we're going to have the next moment, that we're going to have the next day or the next year or whatever it might be, and we go on and we forget what James tells us in James 4:13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. You see, we don't know how long we have. But when we have confidence in where we will spend our eternity, it brings peace to us. But also, the other reason why we need to be so focused on having that confidence of where we'll spend our eternity is that the more unclear we are about our future, the more stress that we can get in our present. You see, the more things that we kind of just have hanging out there and, well, maybe I need to figure this out. Maybe I need to get this straight and that straight. The more that we leave these things unsettled, the more that we get stressed out right now. But I love what Paul tells us in Romans 5, verse 5. He says, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. We can have confidence that we have the promise of eternal life, not because of anything that I did, not because of anything that you did, not because maybe we cleaned up our lives or any of these things like that, but because, like Paul said, we are powerless. And the Bible tells us, he tells us here, and even then later on in this same chapter, he says, when we were still in our sin, Christ died for us. You see, he gives us the confidence of eternal life. And when you and I, when we give our lives to the Lord, when we commit ourselves to him in that way, we put our faith in him, we can have assurance of what's to come. And that brings us peace. Well, the third way that we find peace in our life is giving up concerns about not having enough. Have you ever watched kids at an Easter egg hunt? Just a couple weeks ago, we had our Easter egg hunt here at the church, and it was funny to watch all the kids go out into the field and collect all the Easter eggs. You know, you kind of cut them loose, and they just go nuts, and they're picking up eggs, and they're stuffing them in their baskets, and they see one, and, you know, they're racing to get there before someone else gets there because they're afraid if they don't get that one more egg, well, who knows what will happen. And they fill up their basket, the basket's overflowing. My kids came over to the side of the field and dumped out their baskets because it was so full, and we're like, telling me, hey, watch this for me, I'm going to get more. And they go back and they fill up their basket even more. And they're running around like they're just never going to have enough and never going to have enough and just filling it up as if they don't already have enough candy and enough stuff. Well, that's how some people live their lives. They are grabbing so much as fast as they can, all out of a fear that they might not have enough. That they may not have enough already, and that who knows, maybe in the future they won't have enough. And that pressure of never having enough, never being secure, can be crippling for some people. The fear that if they take their foot off the gas even for a moment, well, it's all going to come crashing down all around them and they're going to just lose it all. And that's not a new problem. I mean, truthfully, God knew that this was going to somehow stress us out in our life. That's why God tried to create this thing and tried to institute this thing called the Sabbath, or taking a rest. You see, when God brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, one of the things he had to teach them to do was to take a break, was to take a day off, was to take some time and to rest. And one of the things that he tries to teach us, the same thing, is to slow down and to take a rest. I mean, even for the Israelites, God would tell them on Friday, you need to collect enough stuff, you need to do enough things to be prepared to do nothing, to not work on Saturday and to take a break. I mean, God even included this in his 10 commandments that he gave to Moses. We read about it in Exodus 31:15. For 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death. God is serious about us taking a rest. And then we see in the New Testament that when Jesus came, he was the fulfillment of the Sabbath practice and so many other practices as we find our rest and our renewal and fulfillment in him. But part of what was kind of built into this practice of the Sabbath rest and taking a break, and part of the reason that God wanted the Israelites to do this was the idea that when they observed the Sabbath, when they wouldn't do any work, that would mean that one of the days of the week, they wouldn't produce anything. They wouldn't earn any more income. They wouldn't bring any more money or any more crops or provide for their family on that day. And so, by doing that, by giving up a day of work, by giving up a day of income and production, they were showing God in a physical and tangible way, God, I'm going to trust you to provide for me. And to do what Paul talks about in Philippians 4, verse 19, he says, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. That doesn't say, my God will meet all of your needs through your hard work. Or, my God will meet all of your needs by you figuring it all out, or taking care of it, or doing a little bit more and a little bit more, and never taking a break. You see, when we trust in God to provide for us, it should relieve the stress that we have of feeling like we've got to do it all, that we've got to earn it all, that we've got to provide it all. Jesus even talks about it. Matthew records it in chapter 6. He says, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Are you stressed because you're worried that you don't have enough? Are you trying to be the one that is providing everything? Are you trying to meet all your needs without God? If that's you, then I want to challenge you. In fact, I think God has already challenged you to take that scary step of taking a break, of taking a day off, of not answering the phone, of not going to the computer, of not working on that project, of just stepping away for a little while and trusting that God is going to do what God says he'll do, and he'll provide for you. I mean, do you really trust him? Do you? When you do that, not only will you see that God will be faithful to his promises, and he'll provide for you and your family, but you'll begin to find the rest and the peace that he's promised to us. Well, the fourth way that we can find peace in our life is by finding acceptance in Jesus. Finding our acceptance in Jesus. There are people who spend so much of their time trying to please everyone else. They change how they act. They change how they look. They change how they talk, how they think, everything. They change all these things just to make everyone around them happy. And the thing is that when we do this, we never find it's enough. We always find that we need to do a little bit more. It always feels like we have more ways that we have to try and impress or please others. It's like we're always chasing that moving target. Do you want to know what God thinks of you, though? Well, Jesus tells us, recorded in John 3:16, he said, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. And I think it's interesting that when we try and please people around us, when we try and do things to make everyone else happy, we're kind of moving towards them. We're trying to go to them and do what they want and please them in their manner. But the incredible thing is that What God did was that he came to us. Jesus put on human flesh, came to earth to live and to serve and to minister and to save us. And Jesus here reminds us that God accepts us and loves us so much that he would send his one and only Son. That's how much God loves us, enough to give up his Son. And it didn't even just end there of God sending his Son to pay the price for our sins and to restore our relationship. No, Jesus, I think, kind of continually calls us. It's like what he does in Matthew 11:28. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Are you weary? Are you burdened? I'm not there with you right now, but I think I can hear people's heads nodding and their brains rattling around. Jesus doesn't say, "Come to me when you have it all together, when you've figured it all out, when you've cleaned up your life, when you've gotten things in order as they should be, when you've fixed all your problems, when you've taken care of all the issues." No, he says, bring me your issues. Bring me your problems. Bring me your baggage. Bring me your fears, your confusion, your doubts, your questions, your objections. And one of the things that we saw over and over again when we were studying the book of Luke just a few weeks ago when we finished up, one of the things that we continually saw was that Jesus never went after the people who pretended to have it all together. Those weren't the ones that Jesus wanted to spend his time with. No, he went to the ones who were considered to be rejected by everybody, pushed away, pushed down in society, even forgotten about by his own people. You see, you're never going to impress everyone. It's just a fact of life. There's going to be people in your life that we don't impress. And honestly, you're never going to impress God. But that's not the point. God doesn't care about being impressed. He doesn't need to be impressed. He just cares about you. So let that feeling that you have to measure up to everyone else's standards and impress all the other people around you, let go of that feeling and just trust in God and rest in the knowledge that he loves you, that he loves you enough to come and die for you. Well, the last way, the fifth way that we can find peace in our life in this pursuit of a holy life is discovering my God-given purpose. There are a lot of people in this world. There's around 7.5 billion people in the world today. Some people have tried to kind of estimate how many people have been born in all of history. I don't really know how you come up with that number because we don't know exactly how far back history goes. But some people have estimated that there have been 108 billion people born in all of history. I mean, I can't even, we can't even fathom that number to try and picture all of those people. But the incredible thing is that not a single individual has ever been born without purpose and without meaning. Now, sure, yeah, maybe sometimes, kids are born without being planned by the parents, but no child was ever born without God having a purpose and meaning for the life. God has a plan and a purpose for every single person. Paul says this in Ephesians 2:10, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." I love that word picture of God's handiwork, of God forming us together, of God intentionally and purposely putting us together how he wants us. You see, God has a purpose for each and every one of us. And when we spend our lives trying to find our purpose and our meaning within ourselves and by ourselves, we're never going to find it. And we're never going to find the peace that comes along with finding it in God. We'll always be looking. But when we find that purpose that God wants to use us for, then the burden, the stress, the worry of what's the point of my life is lifted off of us. I find myself falling into this trap sometimes, this trap of trying to find a purpose that I think I have, that I try to come up with, and I come up with these ideas and things that I want to do for God. And I tell myself, well, it's for God, right? But truthfully, it's more often than not, it's just to kind of satisfy a personal desire to do something, or to do something in a certain way, in a certain manner, or something that I want to try out or I want to do. And really, it has nothing to do with God's purpose for my life. And I think I forget that, first of all, that God is a lot wiser than I am. God knows a lot more than I do. Then I also forget that God has formed each one of us for different purposes in different ways. The Apostle Paul, he wrote about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. He spends this chapter talking about God's church and how God uses different people in different ways and gives different people different gifts to serve within his body and to be a body. And he uses the physical body as an illustration. And I want to read this passage to you. It's a long passage, and I want to read it to you from the Message paraphrase, because I think it's some pretty powerful imagery that's used here in this. So hang with me on this. It says this in verse 12. You can easily enough see how this kind of thing works by looking no further than your own body. Your body has many parts, limbs, organs, cells, but no matter how many parts you can name, you're still one body. It's exactly the same with Christ. By means of his one Spirit, we all said goodbye to our partial piecemeal lives. We each used to independently call our own shots, but then we entered into a large, integrated life in which he has the final say in everything. This is what we proclaimed in word and action when we were baptized. Each of us is now a part of his resurrection body, refreshed and sustained at one fountain, his Spirit, where we all come to drink. The old labels we once used to identify ourselves, labels like Jew or Greek, slave or free, are no longer useful. We need something larger, more comprehensive. I want you to think about how all this makes you more significant, not less. A body isn't just a single part blown up into something huge. It's all different but similar parts arranged and functioning together. If foot said, "I'm not elegant like hand, embellished with rings, I guess I don't belong to this body," would it make it so? If ear said, "I'm not beautiful like eye, limpid and expressive, I don't deserve a place on the head," would you want to remove it from the body? If the body was all eye, how could it hear? If all ear, how could it smell? As it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where he wanted it. But also, I want you to think about how this keeps your significance from getting blown up into self-importance. For no matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you are a part of. An enormous eye or a gigantic hand wouldn't be a body, but a monster. What we have is one body with many parts, each its proper size and in its proper place. No part is important on its own. Can you imagine eye telling hand, "Get lost, I don't need you"? Or head telling foot, "You're fired, your job has been phased out"? As a matter of fact, in practice, it works the other way. The lower the part, the more basic and therefore necessary. You can live without an eye, for instance, but not without a stomach. When it's a part of your own body you are concerned with, it makes no difference whether the part is visible or clothed, higher or lower. You give it dignity and honor just as it is without comparisons. If anything, you would have more concern for the lower parts than the higher. If you had to choose, wouldn't you prefer good digestion to full-bodied hair? The way God designed our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together as a church. Every part dependent on every other part. The parts we mentioned and the parts we don't. The parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into exuberance. Friends, when we can let go of this feeling like I've got to be something that I'm not, when we can let go of this pursuit of trying to somehow push ourselves ahead in the line and push others back behind us, of us being the greatest and just being who God made us to be, we can find peace in knowing that He made me. He made me with these gifts and these talents. And He made others with other gifts and other talents. And I play an important role in the body of Christ, just as every other part is important in the body. And when we can come to that point and accept how He's made us, then we have peace. You know, I'm at the beach this weekend, taking a break, getting away for a little while. I'm going to enjoy some peace, disconnecting from work and things like that, disconnecting from different responsibilities. And sometimes when we do that, we love those times of taking a break, of resting and having peace. But then sometimes as we get closer and closer to the end of that break, the end of that vacation, well, the stress begins to mount. Because we start thinking about all the stuff waiting for us when we get back. We think about all the emails. We think about all the things we have to do. We think about all the stuff that's kind of stacking up in our life because we're afraid of what we're stepping back into. But friends, when you and I, when we finally trust God, when we finally live life the way that God created for us to live life, a whole and complete and full life, then it won't matter whether we're coming back from vacation or heading off to vacation or back home with our family or whatever it might be, because we will be able to find peace, not in ourselves, but peace in Him and in the life that He's made for us. Friends, I hope that you can find peace. I hope you can find the peace in the holy life that He's designed you for. Let me pray for us. God, we thank You for the promise that You give us for peace. And God, we know that sometimes we want to make it on our terms. Sometimes we think we know better. Sometimes we think we can find peace and do things and arrange life in such a way that we can make life okay. But more often than not, we fail at it, God. But Lord, help us to trust in You. And God, I pray that if there are people here who are listening to this today, and maybe there is something within their life that has resonated with some of these different things of ways that we can find peace, Lord, would You help them? Would You help them to trust You? Would You help them to rely on You? Would You help them not to continue to be fighting more and more for things their way or to do things their way or try and push their way? Instead, to just simply trust You and to live life the way that You designed it. God, help us to rest in Your peace. Help us to find Your peace. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Joe, for the Outer Banks. Guys, we're going to finish up today with one more worship song. We could just stand.